The Know Your Gear podcast.
Is you're always pretty excited when you get a new guitar that has a bone nut. I like the bone nut. It's because I like big bones. I don't know. It says, but have never heard you ascribe a performance benefits to its use. Oh, does it really matter? If so, why doesn't everyone use bone? Keep in mind, when I'm excited, it's mostly when I'm excited about a bone nut. It's because I'm excited when it's on an inexpensive guitar. Inexpensive guitars are very, very problematic when it comes to the nut, right? When you think about your old guitars, a lot of guitars, people go, oh, the tuners are cheap. They are cheap. Those tuners probably will hold tune in most cases. Are they very finite? Are they easy to tune? No. Usually when guitars won't stay in tune and they're inexpensive, it's because the nut material is really bad. The slots are cut very bad. And that is the first thing we can fix on a cheap guitar. So if you give me like a really inexpensive Squier, like a $150 Squier, if that's even a thing they make anymore, and you said, hey, do a setup and make it perform well, the first thing I'm going to address is the nut. That's the first focus, frets and nut. Like I'm gonna make those better, besides the general setup, but I'm gonna make sure the frets are dressed right, and the nut is cut correctly, and preferably out of a better material. Now, that material, I really don't have a preference, okay? So bone, if it's graphite, if it's brass, if it's tusk with a Q, or sometimes they call it new bone, or maybe, new bone's another brand of that synthetic material, man-made materials. All of those are pretty good. The harder the material, the better. The reason is because the thing that causes the problem is friction. It makes perfect sense. The string, when you bend a string, when you use a tremolo on a string, your vibrato on your arm, on your, whammy bar arm, whatever you're doing, whenever the string moves out of position ever so slightly, either forward or been stretch, pull back, whatever that movement is, anything that binds it or makes it obviously creates friction, and it doesn't let it return to the exact spot it was before that action happened, you're going to now have the guitar slightly out of tune. So you can imagine we want that to be perfect, which is why, and the best way to always explain how important a nut is to explain how crazy we got with the Floyd Rose system. The Floyd Rose system is where they take and they lock the nut. And the logic being, it's because if you make a locking nut, what happens is when you use the whammy bar on the guitar and the strings get loose and then they get taut and they get loose and then they get taut again, the strings can't move position from the nut because they've been clamped the entire time. So of course they return to the exact position. Now, can the strings stretch out? Sure. But once you stretch the strings enough, they'll stop doing that. So the idea is they won't move out of position because they've been clamped. I don't think you have to go to excess for that, especially if you're not doing whammy bar dives and pulling some Steve Vai tricks. So you just need a nut that's well lubricated and, of course, cut very well out of a hard material. Harder, again, the better. So that's why you hear me get excited. Notice I probably don't look at like a $4,000 guitar and go, well, it's a bone nut. Because at a $4,000 guitar, I'm like, yeah, of course it's going to use a high-end material, whether, like I said, it's a man-made material, synthetic. The materials that they use for inexpensive guitars tend to be really cheap and soft plastic. They're really bad. If you notice something I do, as much as I can, anytime I talk about a guitar where the nut is not very good, notice I pull it out of the slot and show you the underneath. And it's because sometimes they're hollow because they're not even solid. And to me, that's the first sign that you have a problem. Now, again, I'm not arguing whether or not a nut being solid or hollow makes it better or worse. I'm just saying cheap parts, cheap plastic nuts tend to be hollowed out. They don't tend to be very good. Again, at that point, if they're trying to save money, it's all about saving money. And that's why this is a great question. What really goes to it is this. The lower the expense of the guitar, the more they had to make decisions to save money. So then the question is, what are those decisions, right? We know what's in their favor. When they make a guitar in China or Indonesia or Korea or Vietnam or India or, insert here, the exchange rate's in their favor, usually, right? So the dollar is strong, so they can go there where the exchange rate's really in their favor. That makes a lot of sense. I think when you look at a guitar for a couple $100, you go, okay, look, if they're making it in wherever, in Indonesia, or if they're making it in, in China, you're like, yeah, the exchange is part of the factor. It's part of it, okay? It is part of it. Then of course, then we unfortunately one day have to, looking at the way the employees are treated and stuff. And that's a factor too. That's something that always should be on our minds as well. But again, I can only talk about things I know or see or understand, right? I can insinuate a lot of things, but I'm not talking about stuff I know. Okay. So I don't know much about the world when it comes to that stuff. I haven't seen it. I'm trying to use my YouTube power to go to these factories. That's how I got to Cortec. You said, hey, let me go to Cortec, right? I'm trying to go somewhere else next. So you guys know, I'd like to go to a Chinese factory. I'd like to go to a bunch of them and share with you what I see and what I learned. But anyways, my point is, so that's one way they get the cost down. Then the question is, what's the other ways they get the cost? Well, they use cheaper materials. They use cheaper woods. They use cheaper metals. And so that's why when I'm looking at the guitars, you notice I get excited because I'm like, oh, well, they're not skimping here. So we know they're just skimping on, like I said, the exchange rate, the labor costs, whatever. At least we know that's coming, right? And so that's why I get excited when they use real material. But as forth as material bone, first of all, when I make a nut, I mostly make them out of bone. I don't know why. When I started doing guitar repairs, it was really easy, and this is a long time ago. It was very easy for me to do them with Graphtec parts because they came pre-slotted, and it was just an easy exchange. So I would almost push every customer into that, right? So a customer comes in and goes, hey, I need a nut. And I go, okay, you want to do bone, or not bone. Sorry, you want to do graphite, which is Graphtec, graphite nut, or like I said, a new bone, Bone, or a tusk, which is, again, synthetic man-made materials that look like bone, because I could get them pre-made, especially if you go online, you can look, not only are they pre-slotted, but they're made for almost every kind of guitar. So I can get the Epiphone one, the Gibson one, already made and sized. Then over time, you would come across a problem guitar. In other words, this guitar is not templated out. It's not so easy, it's not a traditional Squier or Strat or Les Paul or whatever. So the part that they need is a different shape. So you'd have to get a blank. You can make them out of the same materials. You can get the new bone or the graphite, but I just started getting bone. Does that make sense? And then an amazing luthier that you guys may have heard of, named Neil Moser, he makes bone nuts out of he gets cow femurs and he dries them, and he starts his bone nuts from scratch. Like, he starts from the source. He doesn't get a machined out blank. He actually just boils the cow femur, right, dries it, and he gave me some. And so I felt excited to, like, I'm going to make more, and so I started making bone nuts like that. And so it just became something I do. But it's not specifically because I think it's any better. It's like I said, anything that is a hard material is good. Like I said, I have, if you look at my videos, of course you have to search now. We're going to eventually try to fix that for you guys. But I made a nut out of brass on a video. I made a nut out of bone on a video, right? I've done a ton of the graphite, Graphtec and new bone ones where they're pre-slotted and you just drop them in. So again, it's just, the harder material, the better. And then some people have, preferences. I'm sure, I would imagine if you're vegan, you're probably like, I don't want a bone nut. So I'll be like, all right, fair enough. I'm just guessing. So, but nice. What I want to like about the question and topic is nice observation. Because one of the things that no matter how many videos I make and how much I try to illustrate what I'm seeing and doing in a video, keep in mind at the best, I'm a hack that just got lucky at this. And I mean, when I say that is maybe as a repair person as well, but also as a content creator, right? I'm just figuring it out. When I get excited, it's sometimes I don't explain. And so maybe I'll try to work on that more, explaining what it is exactly that I'm explaining, instead of just saying, oh, I'm excited about these features, maybe go into detail why I think it's exciting that it has these features. So if you like this clip and you'd like to watch another one, you can click right here. And if you want to see the entire episode of the podcast, you can click right there. As always, thank you for your time and know your gear.